Hello everyone, welcome to the 160 Literary and Jury Charge. We're going to start off with some Latin and French words. I will give you the words and then read you the paragraph of their meaning, okay? Here we go. We've got actio in rem, cypress doctrine, laches, and pro forma. Okay, here's your paragraph. Actio in rem is an action brought against a thing. Actio in rem is usually an action against property. Cypress is a French term meaning as near or as close as possible. The court, using the cypress doctrine, tries to carry out the express wishes of the deceased. Laches is a French term meaning a failure to do the proper thing at the proper time. When there is an undue delay in the plaintiff asserting a claim, the term laches is applicable. The Cypress doctrine generally deals with trusts. Laches may place an undue or unreasonable disadvantage on one property or party. Pro forma means to do things in a certain way. Pro forma means for the sake of or as a matter of form. And then I'll give you the words again in the spelling so you can add them to your dictionary after the class. Actio in rem, actio, A-C-T-I-O, N-I-N, rem, R-E-M. That's 3 words. Cypress doctrine. We've got cypress, C-Y space, P-R-E-S space, D-O-C-T-R-I-N-E. That's 3 different words. Laches, L-A-C-H-E-S. Pro forma, 2 words, P-R-O space, forma, F-O-R-M-A. Okay. I've got some medical for you. This is on smoking after bypass surgery. Here we go. Some cigarette smokers who undergo coronary artery bypass grafting, otherwise known as CABG, refuse to quit smoking after their operation, perhaps believing that the treatment has cured them. However, vein grafts placed during CABG tend to fail more readily if the patient keeps smoking. Now, a long-term study has shown that regardless of whether they have undergone CABG, patients with coronary disease who continue to smoke have a higher mortality than their non-smoking counterparts. During the early 2000s, in a trial called the Coronary Artery Surgery Study, 780 patients with coronary artery disease were randomly assigned to either medications or CABG to relieve their symptoms. After 10 years, patients who were initially randomized to medical therapy with the option of later bypass surgery had a somewhat higher survival rate than if they quit smoking than if they continued to smoke. However, after CABG, a large difference was noted in survival rates between quitters and smokers. Those who gave up cigarettes had a 10-year survival rate of 84% compared with 68% for those who continued smoking. In other words, giving up cigarettes after CABG decreased deaths by about half. Compared with persistent smokers, people who gave up cigarettes were less likely to have angina and more likely to be employed. In addition, they were in better physical condition. Continued smoking is harmful for anyone with coronary disease, but this study emphasizes that people who give up cigarettes after CABG are especially likely to get a new lease on life. Very interesting. All right, I've got some straight matter here, and I'm going to read this once, just under 160, and then I'll read it again right at 160, okay? So you're going to hear driving, wheels, condition, jump, hazardous, and stopping. Okay, here we go. Ready? Driving can be hard if the road is wet or covered with snow or ice. Stopping distances are increased when these hazardous driving conditions exist. When you are driving under these hard conditions, remember that it will take you longer to stop and that heavy braking may result in losing control of your car. If the surface is slippery, avoid any quick movements of the steering wheel. When you apply the brakes, pump steadily and evenly to avoid locking the wheels. Slow down and allow extra stopping time. It just takes a split second to lose control of your car. So be sure that your mind does not wander. You need to keep your attention concentrating on your driving. You should not be tense, but you should be fully aware that what you are doing is driving a lethal weapon. Okay, so I'm going to read this again and pick it up and read right at 160. Okay, here we go. Driving can be hard if the road is wet or covered with ice or snow. Stopping distances are increased when these hazardous driving conditions exist. When you are driving under these hard conditions, remember that it will take you longer to stop and that heavy braking may result in losing control of your car. If the surface is slippery, avoid any quick movements of the steering wheel. When you apply the brakes, pump steadily and evenly to avoid locking the wheels. Slow down and allow extra stopping time. It just takes a split second to lose control of your car. So be sure that your mind does not wander. You need to keep your attention concentrated on your driving. You should not be tense, but you should be fully aware of what you are doing is driving a lethal weapon. Okay. Hopefully it was better that second time. All right. We've got some closing arguments for you. Okay, ready? Your Honor, Mr. Phillips, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am very anxious to argue my case. I think I even tried to start arguing in my opening statement. It has been a long time now since we had opening statements. A lot of evidence has been presented to you since that time, and we are now finally back together again where we can talk about what the facts of this case are. I have only a few minutes until the lunch break, and I am not going to try to make my whole presentation in 10 minutes. If you will remember my opening statement, I identified 4 areas that I felt were going to be very important in this trial. I urged you to pay close attention to those 4 areas, particularly when the testimony came in on those subjects, because I felt that they were the keys to solving this particular case. It has been described as a jigsaw puzzle, and I think that is probably a good and apt description of what we have here in a lawsuit of this magnitude, where there are so many witnesses, so much evidence, so many things happening, and where you are trying to fit all of the pieces together coherently to make some sense out of it. The 4 that I identified, number 1 was there a person with a gun standing behind James, assisting him in taking the keys from Sherman? Number 2, did James and Purdy draw their weapons before seeing the shotgun on Burrell's lap? Number 3, did Virgil effectively communicate to James that he was a police officer when he came running up behind him? And number 4, did James surrender to the police before he could have reasonably seen that there were police cars or policemen at the scene? The answer to each of these issues is no. There is not only simply a reasonable doubt as to their truth, but I think the evidence proves that it is very satisfactory from looking at all the evidence that each of these answers is in the negative, that these things did not happen. I want to go over them one by one, starting with the incident at the drive-in theater on the 1st of February with the taking of the keys for the motorcycle from Dwayne. Did James know there was a man standing behind him with a gun? There are a number of ways you can look at this. Okay. I'm going to read you a section from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. This is on become aware of your moods and don't allow yourself to be fooled by the low ones. Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? Your own moods can be extremely deceptive. They can and probably do trick you into believing your life is far worse than it really is. When you're in a good mood, life looks great. You have perspective, common sense, and wisdom. In good moods, things don't feel so hard. Problems seem less formidable and easier to solve. When you're in a good mood, relationships seem to flow and communication is easy. If you are excited, you take it in stride. On the contrary, when you're in a bad mood, life looks unbearably serious and difficult. You have very little perspective. You take things personally and often misinterpret those around you as you impute malignant motives into their actions. Here's the catch. People don't realize their moods are always on the run. They think instead that their lives have suddenly become worse in the past day or even the last hour. So someone who is in a good mood in the morning might love his wife, his job, his car. He is probably optimistic about his future and feels great about his past. But by afternoon, if his mood is bad, he claims he hates his job, thinks of his wife as a nuisance, thinks his car is a junker, and believes he's going nowhere in his career. If you ask him about his childhood while he's in a low mood, he'll probably tell you it was extremely difficult. He will probably blame his parents for his current plight. Such quick and drastic contrasts may seem absurd, even funny, but we're all like that. In low moods, we lose our perspective and everything seems urgent. We completely forget that when we are in a good mood, everything seems so much better. We experience the identical circumstances, who we are married to, where we work, the car we drive, our potential, our childhood entirely differently, depending on our mood. When we are low, rather than blaming our mood as would be appropriate, we instead tend to feel that our whole life is wrong. It's almost as if we actually believe that our lives have fallen apart in the past hour or two. The truth is, life is almost never as bad as it seems when you're in a low mood. Rather than staying stuck in a bad temper, convinced you are seeing life realistically, you can learn to question your judgment. Remind yourself, of course, I'm feeling defensive or angry, frustrated, stressed, or depressed. I'm in a bad mood. I always feel negative when I'm low. When you're in an ill mood, learn to pass it off as simply that, an unavoidable human condition that will pass with time. If you leave it alone, a low mood is not the time to analyze your life. To do so is emotional suicide. If you have a legitimate problem, it will still be there when your state of mind improves. The trick is to be grateful for our good moods and graceful in our low moods, not taking them too seriously. The next time you feel low, for whatever reason, remind yourself, this too shall pass, and it will. Great advice there. Okay. I've got some congressional record, and it's on handicapped Americans. Okay. All right, here we go. Let me give you a word list. You've got handicapped, advancement, foster, veterans, sacrificed, mainstream, obstacles, confronted, rehabilitation, compensate. Let's see here. I believe that's it. United States, there's a brief for that, UNS. All right, here we go. Ready? Let's see. All right, here we go. Mr. Speaker, it is my privilege to introduce in the House today a resolution designating April 12th as National Handicapped American Day. Those of us who have served on the House Committee for Advancement of Handicapped Veterans are quite proud of the long and outstanding record achieved by the Congress of the United States in responding to the needs of the handicapped, and especially to those who have served in the defense of our nation. During the past several years, we have been able to enact legislation to care for their physical and medical needs. We also have helped to foster a general awareness and a better understanding and appreciation of the veterans who have suffered and sacrificed in the line of duty for their country. Congress has recently authorized and improved extensive programs to provide readjustment, compensation, and rehabilitation services to assist the handicapped person in overcoming the obstacles that are confronted. Although we have made great strides in helping the handicapped, there is a lot that still can be done. In particular, the disabled person needs to become part of the mainstream of society. We need to encourage the handicapped to live more productive, full, and rewarding lives. On April 12th, the National Organization for Handicapped Americans will hold its national convention in St. Louis, Missouri. Thousands of handicapped Americans will be attending this important convention. The National Organization for Handicapped Americans will be sponsoring workshops on self-awareness, job potentials, and mainstreaming. The organization's representatives have invited as their keynote speaker Richard Wyburn, Governor of Mississippi, who is a handicapped American. At the request of the National Organization for Handicapped Americans, I am proud to introduce this legislation designating April 12th as the National Handicapped Americans Day. Great article there. All right. I'll give you some opening statements. Here we go. The theory, though, is that witnesses, when you are trying to get details from the witnesses, the evidence will show that you start with a free narrative. It is just a narrative. Tell me everything you know about what happened in the case, and then it becomes more and more detailed and directed. You can ask direct questions or more focused questions, or even in the rare case, you can ask leading questions to try to draw out of witnesses what they know about the case. That makes total sense. It makes sense that you want them to tell you everything, but you are going to have to follow up with certain questions. You are also going to hear, though, that there is a difference between interviews and actual interrogations. Now, interrogations are designed for the suspects. They are not designed for the witnesses. And you are going to hear in this case, in fact, you are going to hear a lot in this case about interrogations, about the interrogative process, about the actual process of asking important questions, and the process of obtaining truthful information from the suspects. You are going to hear that confessing to a crime, and in fact the most serious crime of all, is murder, but confessing to any crime is an unnatural act. It goes against a human's feeling of self-preservation, okay? That should make sense to everybody, and the evidence is going to show that. It is going to show that it is difficult to have somebody admit to a very serious crime. So there are techniques that are developed to encourage suspects to talk. Again, these are interrogations. These aren't interviews. This is done to encourage suspects to provide truthful information. Okay, and that concludes our literary and jury charge for the 160 class. Have a great day.